I'm 71 years old now, and for 4 decades I've been lying to everyone I've ever loved. In the root cellar beneath my cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, there lives a creature that science says doesn't exist. I call her Miriam. She's a Sasquatch. And for 40 years she's been hiding from something far worse than humans. This is the story I've never told, the story of a friendship that cost me everything, and the truth about what really lives in the deep places of this world. My name is Earl Whitmore. In 1984, I was 31 years old, recently divorced and looking for a place to disappear. I'd spent 8 years as a coal miner in McDowell County, West Virginia, until a tunnel collapse killed 3 of my friends and left me with a shattered left leg and nightmares that wouldn't quit. The settlement money wasn't much, but it was enough to buy 60 acres of nothing in Patrick County, Virginia. Remote, quiet, forgotten. That's what I wanted. To be forgotten. The property came with a cabin that hadn't been lived in for 20 years and a root cellar dug into the hillside that was older than the cabin itself. The realtor called it a fixer-upper. I called it perfect. I moved in during the spring of 1984, spent the summer rebuilding the cabin, fixing the roof, making it livable. I planted a garden, got some chickens, started healing in the way that only solitude and physical labor can heal a broken man. By fall, I'd almost convinced myself I could be happy there. Then October came, and everything changed. October 14th, 1984. I remember the date because it was my mother's birthday. She'd been dead 3 years by then, but I still marked the day. I'd hiked up to a ridge overlooking the valley to watch the sunset and think about her. That's when I heard the sound. It wasn't a scream exactly, more like a moan, deep and resonant, carrying through the trees like something wounded and afraid. I'd heard black bears in pain before. I'd heard deer hit by cars, crying out in that awful way they do. This was different. This sounded almost human. I should have gone home, should have minded my own business. But my mother raised me to help things that were suffering, even when it was dangerous, even when it was stupid. I followed the sound for nearly a mile, deeper into the woods than I'd ever gone. The light was failing fast, and I was about to turn back when I found the source. At first, I thought it was a bear, a massive dark shape huddled against a rock outcropping, half hidden by brush. But bears don't have arms like that. Bears don't have hands. It was covered in dark reddish-brown hair, matted with blood and dirt, maybe 7 feet tall, though it was hunched over, curled in on itself like it was trying to disappear. And there was a smell. Not unpleasant exactly, but wild, musky, ancient. The creature lifted its head and looked at me. I'll never forget those eyes. Dark brown, almost black, but filled with something I recognized immediately. Not animal awareness, not predatory instinct, fear, pure, overwhelming terror. The creature was afraid. Not of me, I realized, of something else, something that had driven it here, wounded it, left it dying against these rocks. It made a sound then, soft, pleading, like a child asking for help. I should have run. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run. Instead, I said, "Easy now. I'm not going to hurt you." Getting Miriam back to my cabin took most of the night. She was injured badly, deep gashes across her back and shoulders that looked like claw marks. Something had attacked her, something with claws bigger than any bear I'd ever seen. She couldn't walk well. Her left leg dragged and she leaned on me heavily, her weight nearly crushing me several times. I'm not a small man. I was 6'2" and 200 pounds in those days. But Miriam was bigger, 7 feet, maybe 400 pounds. Supporting her was like supporting a collapsing building. We made it to my property just before dawn. I couldn't get her into the cabin, too many stairs, too narrow a door, but the root cellar had a wide entrance cut into the hillside. I got her inside, laid her down on some old blankets I'd stored there, and tried to figure out what the hell I was going to do. The wounds needed cleaning. I had basic first aid supplies, whiskey for disinfectant, bandages, a flashlight. I worked for hours cleaning the gashes, wrapping them as best I could. Miriam whimpered but didn't resist. She seemed to understand I was trying to help. When I finished, I sat back against the cellar wall, exhausted and covered in blood that wasn't human. "What are you?" I whispered. She looked at me with those intelligent eyes and made a sound. Not a word exactly, but close. Safe? I think she was asking if she was safe. Yeah, I said, not knowing if it was true. You're safe here. She closed her eyes and slept. I stayed with her until morning, too afraid and too amazed to leave. The first week was about survival. Miriam's wounds were severe, and I had no idea how to treat an animal that wasn't supposed to exist. I cleaned the gashes daily, changed the bandages, brought food and water. She ate meat, fish, vegetables, and fruit. I gave her whatever I had. On the third day, her fever broke. On the fifth, she could sit up on her own. By the end of the week, she was standing, testing her weight on that injured leg. She was going to live. That's when I had to make a decision. I could let her go, open the cellar door, point toward the woods, and pretend none of this had ever happened. She could return to whatever life she'd had before. I could go back to being a hermit with no secrets except the normal ones. But I couldn't stop thinking about those claw marks, about the terror in her eyes when I'd found her. Something had done that to her. Something out there in the woods. And if she went back, it might find her again. You can stay, I told her one evening, sitting in the cellar with a lantern between us. If you want. I know it's not much, but it's safe, and I won't tell anyone. Miriam looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached out one massive hand and touched my shoulder, gently, carefully, like she was afraid of breaking me. And she stayed. The first year was the hardest. I had to restructure everything about my life to accommodate Miriam's presence. The root cellar became her permanent home, and I spent months making it comfortable. I dug out more space, reinforced the walls, installed ventilation. I built her a proper bed frame with a mattress I ordered from a catalog, telling the delivery driver it was for a guest room. Food was a constant challenge. Miriam ate a lot. Maybe 10 pounds of food a day. I hunted more, fished more, expanded my garden. I drove to different towns to buy groceries so no one would notice how much I was purchasing. Every trip required planning, deception, careful thought. But the real challenge was communication. Miriam was intelligent, more intelligent than I'd expected. She understood my words, could follow complex instructions, and had obvious emotional responses to things, but her vocal anatomy couldn't produce human speech. The sounds she made were too deep, too resonant, shaped by a throat and mouth that weren't designed for our language, so we invented our own. Hand signals first, simple ones, yes, no, food, water, pain, safe. Then, more complex gestures. I'd point at things and say the word. She'd create a gesture for it. Within 6 months, we had a vocabulary of maybe 200 signals. By the end of the first year, we could have conversations. That's when I started asking about her past. Where did you come from? She gestured. Mountains, far away, walking long time. Why did you leave? Her hands stopped, her eyes went distant, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked afraid again. Not afraid of me, afraid of the memory. She made a gesture I didn't recognize. Then she touched the scars on her back. Then she made the gesture again. What is that? I asked. What are you trying to tell me? But she wouldn't answer. She turned away, curled up on her bed, and wouldn't look at me for the rest of the night. I didn't ask again, not for a long time. The years passed, 1985, 1986, 1987. The world went on without us. Reagan and Gorbachev, the Challenger explosion, the stock market crash, while Miriam and I built our secret life in those Virginia hills. I expanded the cellar twice more, connecting it to a camouflaged outdoor area where she could see the sky at night. I installed a small wood stove for winter, ran a generator line for electricity, gave her a radio and eventually a small television. She loved music, especially the old country songs I'd grown up with. Patsy Cline, Johnny Cash, Hank Williams. She'd sit for hours listening, swaying slightly, at peace. I learned more about her kind through observation and patient questioning. They lived in family groups, she told me through gestures, deep in the mountains where humans never went. They had language, culture, traditions. They buried their dead. They taught their young. They had names, though she couldn't speak hers in a way I could understand. So I called her Miriam, after my grandmother. She seemed to accept it. She'd been alone for a long time before I found her. Years, maybe longer. Her family was gone. What happened to them? She made that gesture again, the one I didn't understand. Miriam, what does that mean? What is that sign? She looked at me with those ancient eyes, and for the first time, she tried to speak, really tried. The sound that came out was deep and guttural, but I could almost understand it. Ego. I stared at her. Wendigo. She nodded, her whole body shuddering with the memory, and suddenly, everything made sense. I'd heard the stories growing up. Everyone in Appalachia had. Wendigo, the creature from Native American legend, a monster born from forbidden acts, from hunger so extreme it drove humans to consume their own kind. Tall, skeletal, with antlers like a stag and a hunger that could never be satisfied. Most people thought it was just a story, a warning tale to keep people from wandering too far into the woods. But Miriam's scars told a different story. Something had attacked her, something with claws, something that had killed her family and driven her hundreds of miles from her home, something she was still afraid of after years of safety. Is that what's out there? I asked her. Is that what hurt you? She nodded. Is it still hunting you? She made a gesture that meant uncertainty. Then she touched her scars again. It finds us, she seemed to say, always finds us. I sat with that knowledge for a long time, trying to understand what it meant. Trying to understand what I'd brought into my life. Miriam, are there more of them? More Wendigo? She held up several fingers. Many. And your people, the Sasquatch, they're, food, she gestured. We are food to them. I felt sick. All those years of hiding, all that fear, it wasn't just about avoiding humans. It was about avoiding something far worse, something that hunted her kind in the deep places of the world. You're safe here, I told her, hoping it was true. Nothing's going to find you. I won't let it. She looked at me with gratitude, but also with something else. Doubt. She'd been found before. She'd thought she was safe before, and everything she'd loved had been taken from her. The close calls came regularly over the years. In 1990, a hunter got lost on my property and spent the night in my barn. I kept Miriam silent in the cellar, checking on her every few hours to make sure she hadn't made a sound. She understood the danger. She was perfectly still for 16 hours straight. In 1994, a development company tried to buy my land. They sent surveyors who walked every inch of the property. I stayed with Miriam in the cellar for 3 days, both of us barely breathing when footsteps passed overhead. In 1998, my brother visited unexpectedly. He wanted to reconcile after years of silence. I kept him in the cabin, made excuses about the cellar being full of junk, and prayed he wouldn't notice the extra food I was buying. Each time, we survived. Each time, we became more careful. But the real fear wasn't humans. It was what Miriam heard in the woods at night. She'd wake me sometimes, coming to the cabin door in the darkness, her eyes wide with terror. She'd point toward the mountains, make that gesture for Wendigo, and shake her head. You hear something? She'd nod. Is it close? She'd make a gesture that meant not yet, but coming. I started keeping a rifle by my bed, started staying awake on certain nights when the wind blew from the north, started wondering if I was protecting Miriam or just delaying the inevitable. In 2001, I turned 48. Miriam had been with me for 17 years. We'd developed a rhythm, a life, a partnership that went beyond anything I'd ever experienced with another human. She knew my moods before I did. She could tell when I was sad about my mother, when I was thinking about my ex-wife, when the nightmares from the mine collapse were coming back. She'd sit with me on those nights, her massive presence somehow comforting. And I knew her just as well. I knew when she was missing her family, when she was remembering the attack that had scattered them, when she heard something in the woods that brought back the old terror. We were family. Different species, different worlds, but family. That's why what happened in 2005 hurt so much. I found Miriam in the cellar one morning, scratching something into the dirt floor with a stick. I'd seen her make marks before, counting things, keeping track of days. But this was different. This was a map, mountains, rivers, a path leading west, and at the end of the path, a mark I'd never seen before. What is this? I asked. She made a gesture that meant home. Your home? Where you came from? She nodded. Why are you drawing this? She looked at me with those ancient eyes, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Longing. She missed them, her people, her kind, wherever they were. She'd been safe with me for 20 years, but she'd never stopped missing them. Do you want to leave? The question hurt to ask. The answer hurt more. She made a gesture that meant complicated. Tell me. She gestured slowly, carefully, wanting me to understand. Others alive, she said, far away, maybe find them. But the Wendigo, here too, she gestured, coming closer, every year, closer. I felt cold suddenly. They're coming here? She nodded. Not for me, she clarified, for her. They could smell her, she explained through gestures. They'd been tracking her for years, slowly, patiently, getting closer every season. They didn't move fast, they didn't need to. They had forever to hunt. And eventually, they would find her. Then we'll leave, I said, both of us. We'll go wherever you need to go. She shook her head. You can't survive, she gestured. Too far, too dangerous, human. I'm not letting you go alone, she touched my face gently. Old man, she gestured. Can't protect me forever. I wasn't old, I was 52. But I understood what she meant. She was planning for a future where I wouldn't be there, where she'd have to survive on her own or find others of her kind who could help her. And the thought of losing her was unbearable. We didn't speak of it again for years, but I saw her adding to the map sometimes, refining it, memorizing the path. She was preparing, even if she wasn't ready to leave. In 2010, I had a heart attack, not a major one. A warning, the doctors called it, but it left me weak for months, unable to care for Miriam the way I had before. She cared for me instead. She'd bring water to the cabin door, leave food she'd gathered, check on me at night to make sure I was still breathing. The roles had reversed, and I hated it. I'm supposed to protect you, I told her one evening, sitting on my porch while she stood in the shadows of the tree line. Not the other way around. She made a gesture I'd come to know well over the years. Family protects family. I'm getting old, Miriam. What happens when I can't take care of you anymore? She made the gesture for the map, for her people far away. Will you go to them when I'm gone? She didn't answer, but I saw the conflict in her eyes. She didn't want to leave me, but she knew she might have to. By 2015, I'd brought my nephew Marcus into the secret. Marcus was 35, a wildlife biologist who'd always been more comfortable with animals than people. I trusted him more than anyone else in my life. When I told him about Miriam, showed him the cellar, introduced them, he didn't run. He sat down on the cellar floor and stared at her for a long time. You're real, he said finally. Miriam made a sound that might have been agreement. All those stories, all those legends, and you've been here the whole time. 31 years, I said, and she's not the only thing that's real, Marcus. There are other things out there, things that hunt her kind. I told him about the Wendigo, about what Miriam had survived, about the things she heard in the woods at night getting closer every year. Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. How do we protect her? I could have cried, would have if I wasn't so stubborn. For now, we keep doing what we've been doing. But eventually, she might need to leave, find her own kind, and I need to know someone will help her do that when I can't. Marcus looked at Miriam. You'd do that? Leave here? She made a series of gestures. Marcus couldn't understand them, but I translated. She says she doesn't want to, but she knows she might have to. The things hunting her are patient. They'll wait until I'm gone, and then they'll come. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we make sure she's not alone when that happens. The winter of 2020 was the worst we'd ever experienced, not because of the cold, not because of COVID, which barely touched our isolated corner of Virginia, because of what came out of the mountains. Miriam sensed it first. She woke me in the middle of a January night, her whole body trembling with terror. She pointed north, toward the high ridges, and made the gesture I'd learned to dread. Wendigo. Close. I grabbed my rifle and followed her to the edge of the property. The night was clear, cold, moonlit. I could see for miles, and I saw it. A shape moving through the trees on the far ridge. Tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. It moved wrong, jerky, and unnatural, like something wearing a body it hadn't been born in. Even from that distance, I could feel its hunger, could feel it looking for something, looking for her. "Get back to the cellar," I whispered to Miriam. "Now." She didn't move. She was frozen, staring at the thing on the ridge, 30 years of running and hiding, and fear crashing down on her all at once. "Miriam!" I grabbed her arm, tried to pull her toward safety. "Move!" She made a sound I'd never heard before, low, mournful, defeated. "It found me," she gestured. "Finally found me. It hasn't found you yet. It doesn't know you're here. But it will if you don't hide right now." Something in my voice broke through her terror. She looked at me, saw my determination, and nodded. We made it back to the cellar. I sealed the entrance, covered it with brush, and sat in the darkness with her for 3 days. I could hear it sometimes, moving through the forest, making sounds that weren't quite animal, weren't quite human, searching, but it didn't find us. On the 4th day, the sounds stopped. I waited another week before I went outside. The thing was gone, but it had left marks on the trees near my property, deep gouges in the bark, territorial markers maybe, or warnings. It knew something was here. It just didn't know exactly where. "We got lucky," I told Miriam that night. "But luck runs out. We need to think about the future." She looked at me with those ancient, tired eyes. "I know," she gestured. "Time to go." The next 3 years were about preparation. Marcus helped me plan a route west, toward the mountains where Miriam believed others of her kind still lived. We mapped safe zones, identified places where she could hide during the day, calculated how long the journey would take. 6 months, maybe longer. Traveling at night, avoiding humans, staying ahead of whatever was hunting her. It was dangerous. It might be impossible. But staying here was worse. Miriam's health had started declining. She was old by Sasquatch standards, probably in her 70s. Her joints ached. Her vision wasn't what it had been. She couldn't run like she used to, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. If the Wendigo found her now, she wouldn't survive. "Are you sure about this?" I asked her one evening in 2023. "It's a long journey. You might not make it." She made a gesture that meant acceptance. "Die running or die hiding," she seemed to say. "Same death. Rather die free." I understood. I'd felt the same way after the mine collapse. Sometimes the how matters more than the when. "I wish I could come with you." She touched my face gently. "Old man," she gestured again, but with affection this time. "My old man. You saved me, all those years ago. I was dying inside when I came to these mountains. You gave me a reason to live." She made the gesture for family, for love. "You saved me too." The night she left, March 15th, 2024, I walked with her to the edge of my property. 40 years of secrets, of fear, of friendship. 40 years of building a life together that no one else would ever understand. And now it was ending. "You remember the route?" She nodded. "You know where to find food, water, shelter?" Another nod. "If you find your people, will you be happy?" She paused. Then she made a series of gestures. "We'll miss you. Always miss you, but need to try. Need to find home." "I know," my voice cracked. "I know you do." She reached out and put her hand on my shoulder. That same gesture she'd made 40 years ago when I'd first told her she could stay. Gentle, careful, full of meaning. "Thank you," she gestured, "for everything." "You're welcome," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Now go, before I change my mind and lock you in that cellar forever." She made a sound that might have been laughter. Then she turned and walked into the darkness, disappearing into the trees like she'd never existed at all. I stood there until dawn, hoping she'd change her mind, hoping she'd come back. She didn't. It's been 8 months since Miriam left. I don't know if she made it. Don't know if she found her people. Don't know if the things hunting her caught up before she reached safety. Some nights I hear sounds in the forest, and I wonder if it's her coming back. It never is. Marcus visits regularly. He's worried about me, alone in this cabin with nothing but memories. He wants me to move closer to civilization, to stop living like a hermit. But I can't leave. Not yet. Because sometimes, late at night, I hear something else in the woods, something moving through the trees with that wrong, jerky motion, something searching for a prey that isn't here anymore. The Wendigo came back. Twice that I know of. Each time it circled my property, made those sounds, left those marks on the trees. Each time it eventually moved on, following some trail I couldn't see. Following Miriam. I hope she's fast enough. Hope she's smart enough. Hope the years with me taught her something about survival, about hiding, about staying ahead of the things that want to consume you. I hope she finds her people. And I hope, wherever she is, she knows she was loved. That for 40 years, in a root cellar in Virginia, she had a family. She had a home. She had someone who would have died to protect her. That's more than a lot of humans ever get. I'm 71 years old now. My heart's not what it used to be. My doctor says I should slow down, but every evening I walk to the edge of my property and look west toward the mountains, toward wherever Miriam might be. And I talk to her. I tell her about my day, about the weather, about the music I've been listening to, about the garden I'm still planting, even though I don't need to grow food for 2 anymore. I don't know if she can hear me, don't know if any of it matters, but it makes me feel less alone. 40 years ago, I found a dying creature in the woods and made a choice that changed both our lives. I gave her shelter. I gave her safety. I gave her 40 years of protection from a world that would never understand what she was. And in return, she gave me something I'd lost in that mind collapse, something I thought I'd never find again. Purpose. The secret's out now. I've written it all down, everything I remember, everything I learned, everything I felt. When I die, Marcus will decide what to do with this story. Maybe he'll share it, maybe he'll keep it hidden. Either way, I want the world to know one thing. Miriam was real. She was intelligent, emotional, capable of love and fear and hope. She wasn't a monster or a myth. She was a person, different from us, but no less worthy of dignity and respect. And somewhere out there, in the deep places where humans fear to go, there are more like her, living, hiding, hoping that someday the world will be safe enough for them to exist without fear. I hope I live to see that day, but if I don't, I'll die knowing I made a difference to one of them, and sometimes that's enough. Earl Whitmore passed away on November 3, 2024, peacefully in his cabin in Patrick County, Virginia. His nephew Marcus found this manuscript among his belongings, along with 40 years of journals, photographs, and evidence of a friendship that defied explanation. The root cellar is empty now, but if you visit the property on certain nights, you can still hear music drifting from somewhere deep in the hills. Patsy Cline, Johnny Cash, Hank Williams, and sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can hear something else, something singing along,